Okay, so let's start. I started growing the skull on my 4mm EVA foam. You might be asking why I didn't just find a pattern for wolf head. Well, in all honesty, it's simply because I enjoy learning how it looked like along the way. And it also helps me get a good grasp of the shape that forms Blaidd's canine features. Speaking of canine features, did you know that the first ever involvement of a man-wolf, or well, wolf-man, is from the Epic of Gilgamesh? So it goes that one of goddess Ishtar's suitor back then was a shepherd, and he was so devoted towards her that she kinda got tired of it, so instead he turns him into a wolf. Well, that explains why even Gilgamesh saw the red flags. From this point onward, I started heating up the parts of the skull that needs shaping, because some of them are concave and I want to follow a lot of it, so the quote-unquote muscles I place later on would sit on the skull properly, and in turn would help me in placing the fur later on. And since we're still on the topic of man-wolves, another example are from the Greeks. In 425 BC, Herodotus, a Greek historian, described a nomadic tribe called Neuri to have magical abilities that transforms them into man-wolves for several days of the year. Well, in reality, these people come from Scythia, a land which included parts of Central Asia and Eastern Europe, and they used these wolf skins to keep them warm during the harsh winters. So what you're seeing me do now is I am heating up these parts in order to fold them in, because these parts shouldn't be flimsy since it's only these parts of the jaw, so I have to make sure that they hold themselves together. And in order to hold themselves together, it really helps for EVA foam to be a lot more thicker and hold a certain shape that it wants to stay in. Even now, I'm attaching these small pieces of foam in order to reinforce the shape. Now I'm cutting channels in order to place the teeth in. Also, I didn't realize that canine teeth are a lot more pointy, which gives in their priority of tearing up meat when hunting their prey. And since we're almost 2 minutes into the video, this is the format that I want to change with my future videos. There are a lot of things, a lot of references in the characters that I make props out of that I really wanted to talk about, but I wasn't confident of hearing myself talking on the video, not until now. And since it took me a severely long time to upload this video, I want this to be different, which also goes for my next videos. I really enjoy the process of making the wolf head down from the skull, and it makes me want to engage in other projects that involve skulls and bones, like Elias of Ancient Bagus Bride or Yoru's Spinal Sword from Chainsaw Man. And working with the teeth, I didn't really know that they look like that. From my previous videos, you can see that I'm mostly surrounded by cats in my home. But here you go, we finally have the skull base for our Blaidd's wolf head. Now we continue towards the facial muscles. I couldn't really replicate all of the different muscles layer by layer since every muscle fibers in our body have different thickness, while the EVA foam that I have, well, I don't have that much. In fact, I only have one. Going back to the Greeks though, the term lichen actually came from the word leucanthropos, with leukos meaning wolf and anthropos means human, which might involve this king in ancient Greece called King Lycaon who tried to feed Zeus human flesh in order to test if he really is an all-knowing god or not. And so Zeus didn't like that, and he turned him into a wolf, which historically actually makes him the first werewolf. And now that the wolf muscles are done, it's time to go to the human parts. If you look closely at Blaidd, the area from his eyes above has a muscle structure more similar to humans rather than canines. So I really had to try to make both mix together well, because that makes his facial features pop a lot differently than, a regular wolf. Which actually was quite a challenge, since I didn't know where the wolf muscle parts stop and where the human parts begin. That's why I made like these indented parts to simulate the forehead muscles and those muscles under the eyes. Which is why it puts the perspective of Blaidd's character, that he is a man-wolf, but he is much more man than wolf, honestly. Evidence given during the time that he was given frost magic that the cold did actually bother him, much to the point that Rani gave him the coat that he has, which we'll actually make later. And this is the part where I start removing the original fangs that I made, since I found a way to make them rounder and much more, pointier to simulate a better looking fang. And there it is. Now I'm using soldering iron in order to try to round off the sharp parts from the cuts I made in shaping the teeth, and then sanding them down in order to make them a bit more smoother later on. And then we start to prep the exposed parts of the mouth. It's such a weird process for me, since usually the process is almost at the end when I started applying acrylic emulsion, and then applying primer, and then applying paint. But right now I gotta give it a go, since I have to paint the mouth, which is a very fleshy organ, and I'm not sure how I'm going to go through with this, but didn't stop me before. So what I'm using now is using dab on shoe polish to mix a good dark brown with the pink to create a color that's a lot more closer to the gums or inside the mouth. And I lost the footage of making the tongue. I'm sorry, but here we go. And finally, it's time to prepare for applying the fur. I wrapped the head by sections to help me apply the fur, since I couldn't exactly just stretch it over the head and hope for the best. They need to be in sections, since there are curves of the head that doesn't follow a single plane, and also have to be shaped and pieced together. Which makes this part the scariest for me, since unlike working with EVA foam, when I do make a mistake, I can just cut it out and do over, or heat it up and shape it the way I want. With fur, especially since I have a limited amount of fake fur on stock, if I mess it up, that's a lot of material already wasted. Which means if I mess up that, I have to peel it off. Which means that I might peel off everything. Which means I might have to start over from scratch. All progress, well, back to zero. And I used wires to add this black part into the bottom of the dog's mouth. I don't know what that is actually, but they all have those. Then I started adding frames to attach the ears, since the dog ears actually go way back of their head, more than I thought of. I didn't really know about dogs' anatomy or canines in general until this part. And even now, after this project, after seeing the images that I had to reference, I know a lot less than what I knew before. And there we go. Finally applied all the fur, but even so, it still looks thick. So now, even with all the fur attached, I have to trim it down. Which is again another part that scares me, since if I manage to over trim some parts, then the head would look a lot messed up. And I know that Blaidd isn't the most well-groomed character and well-groomed canine species in existence, but he has to look rough, but he doesn't have to look messed up. So I have to slowly trim away at the thick fur parts. And finally, I have these cheap wigs that I bought online in order to create the coat. I'm trying to stitch all of them away individually, because I cannot just pull them off, because it would be a problem for me if I have to restitch them down to the coat. So I have to be careful, and also I have to separate them properly so that they don't tangle up in the stitching process. So I have to place them in such an order. And I think it's pretty evident here that I really have no idea how to stitch properly, and yet I just try to do the loop back and under the next, if you know what I mean. The only experience I have with stitching is with cross stitch back when I was in elementary, and I don't even do the same thing here. But for the love of cosplay and the character we cosplay, we tried to start learning things that we would never. And then I started painting the eyes, and apparently Blaidd's eyes have a dark sclera, and so I did it, and when I applied with the head, it feels uneasy to look at. And now all that's left is the wig, which will serve as the mane going back towards the back of Blaidd's head. I put the wig in a black dye and for a bit to darken and match it with the fur color. And now it's finally done. Or is it? You see, I didn't really like how it looked like when all the pieces went together. The head was much bigger than I planned it to be, and the cloak has such thin fur and is so hard to put on me. So, as any sane person would do, I remade the head all over again. So the first change I did was make everything a lot smaller. Make the skull smaller, make the jaw smaller, make the teeth, everything smaller down. And also reapplying the facial muscles. Oh, the eye color. I also have to change the eye color since his eyes are actually purple on the iris, so I have to buy contact lens for that. And then this time I had to apply the scars on his face. I shaved the parts where I want the scars to be in, and then placed tissue paper soaked in acrylic emulsion, like paper mache, so that it's ready to paint after drying for 24 hours. My mindset was that I didn't really want to give you guys an output that was any lesser than the standard that I have for myself, which I like improving every day. And since you guys have supported me even back from my first videos like the Chainsaw Man, Berserk, and Devil May Cry props, it put me in a wall that made me stuck on a loop of wanting a result, yet I got paralyzed on thinking how I'd achieve it. And only after almost a year and a half that I just thought, why not let you guys in the process of it rather than just the output? So here we are, which is why I am planning to make weekly or bi-weekly videos. I'm also working on making my videos a lot more concise but at the same time full of information. This cosplay isn't finished yet as of now, but for the following weeks I'll take you guys along with me, making my props and cosplays, to me finding a place to shoot my cosplays, slowly transforming my videos into more like cosplay vlogs. But don't worry, I'll still keep making how-to videos, but those definitely comes along after a cosplay build is fully finished. And that's it. I hope you still like this video, so like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!